On this episode of Hoosier Adventures, we check out Six Flags over Texas. There was a long line of cars waiting to get into the parking lot that day. This is filmed on a Sunday, late September, during the coronavirus pandemic. Of course, you're going to see everyone wearing masks in the park. You actually had to schedule a check-in time, as well as buy a ticket and purchase parking online. As you went through the gate, of course, they took everyone's temperature, and they had some fairly sophisticated equipment as far as body heat monitoring and things like that. This is going to be kind of a different video than what I normally do here. I'm going to talk about some observations about the park, tips and tricks for the park that I would recommend, and finally just kind of give you an idea of whether I would recommend it or not. The first thing you should know about Six Flags over Texas, it's kind of maze-like. So this was my first trip to this park, and beforehand I wanted to find a map so that I could kind of figure out where I was going. Wasn't able to find a good map online. I did find a lot of very highly stylized maps, and they didn't hand out brochures when you got there that had maps on them. So you're kind of at the mercy of the signs that point you around to the different rides. But overall, it has a very odd layout for an amusement park. It's not like a spoken hub kind of thing, or it's not like a big open space that's kind of filled in with different rides and attractions and things like that. It's kind of like a maze, and you've got to be cautious about that, because the day that we were there, some of the different paths connecting different parts of the park were actually closed. I don't know if that was just due to the low capacity or due to the coronavirus, but it could take you a little while to get from one place to another. A fun fact about the park, it's actually the first Six Flags park. So the Six Flags refer to the 6 countries that have governed the territory of Texas at different points in history. This is the Spanish section, so the section for Spain. I was a little bit disappointed in the theming. I thought it was going to be like, kind of well-themed, well-defined lands. This Spain section seemed like it was the most well-defined. What you're looking at here is the bobsled coaster, which was really cool to see. I actually didn't know any of these still existed. Now here you'll see this giant loop that kind of looks like the Stargate from Stargate. It's called El Diablo. It was closed that day. Get ready, that's going to be a very common theme running through this video. Such and such ride is closed. This ride is closed. A lot of things were closed that day while I was there. We were here while the park was decorated for Halloween. I thought the Halloween events would be a little bit bigger than they are. I didn't see any kind of haunted houses or anything like that, although the park did have some really impressive decorations. As you can tell from the sign here, this is the end of the Spain section. That's it. Now, I've been to several Six Flags throughout the United States. I understand that they're kind of not known for their theming. I just kind of thought this would be a little bit better, especially considering it was the first Six Flags park. And I know I'm criticizing it. I mean, the themes for the different countries, as well as some of the theming for Gotham City, which you'll see later in the video, isn't particularly great. I do enjoy what's there. Some of these old buildings that you can sort of walk through, and the facade of an Old West town, as well as what kind of looks like an antebellum mansion. That being said, probably 75% of the shops and restaurants were closed due to the coronavirus, as well as low capacity, so you can't really go explore them the way that you normally would. And a lot of them are restaurants, as well as gift shops that kind of sell normal Six Flags merchandise. So not really anything I'm interested in coming home with, but hey, if you have a collection of Six Flags merchandise, you probably want to hit them up. So we left the Spain section a few minutes ago, and we're headed toward the part of the park that has the 2 biggest and probably best roller coasters, the Texas Giant as well as Titan. So the Texas Giant was actually a wooden roller coaster that was kind of converted into this wood-steel hybrid. It looks really, really cool, and it's one of the top-rated roller coasters in America from what I understand. I would describe myself as someone who likes roller coasters, but I'm not a coaster enthusiast by any stretch of the imagination. So if you know a little bit more, feel free to put it in the comments. This section over here that looks like a train station, I believe is actually a train station for the park's train. However, the train was closed that day, and you can't really see it on camera, but this train station is in desperate need of repair. So if it is a functioning train station, for the park's train. It looks like maintenance budgets have been slashed across the board here at Six Flags Over Texas. Here you'll actually see a pathway in the park that was closed off at the beginning of the day, but when we came back by, they had opened those Texas flag gates, so you were able to walk through that section. While we were waiting in line for the Texas Giant, we overheard some of the employees say that the day before we went, which was a Saturday in late September, at one point during the day, the line for the Texas Giant had been over 2.5 hours long. And the day that we were there, we went back in the afternoon and actually tried to ride it again, and the line was incredibly long. So do it as fast as you can when you get there. Here's a map of the park. If you want to, you can pause it, look at it. Like I said, though, all the maps that I'm able to find of Six Flags Over Texas are highly stylized and kind of make it look like everything's way closer and easier to get to than it actually is. Just to remind our viewers here, though, I don't really have any great footage of the Roller Coaster Titan other than what you've already seen, but it's a great ride and you should definitely ride it as well. It's very tall, very fast, and it actually has a helix at the end of the ride where the train goes upward. Now, I don't think I've ever been on a roller coaster that does that. Normally, when you have a helix in a roller coaster, it's downward. On the day that we went here to Six Flags Over Texas, ticket prices were hovering around $40 for the day. Initially, I thought that was very expensive considering the park was only open between the hours of 2 and 9. And also because so many of the rides were closed. Now, as time went on, especially as we got later in the day, I kind of realized that ticket price probably wasn't high enough because a lot of riffraff was coming into the park, especially as the park was getting ready to close, which I think is very odd, but you saw it. We actually had a problem while we were waiting in line for the Texas Giant the second time. A group of probably 15 to 20 young men cut in front of maybe 1,000 people waiting in line for the ride, and they were talking about fighting people, and they were causing all kinds of problems, and security basically never came to deal with it. And I told one of the people who was working the ride, and I think other people also told them, and they kind of shooed me off. They said, if we didn't see it happen, we can't do anything about it or whatever. So I don't think that there's enough security in the park, and I'm sure they're probably a little bit understaffed, especially considering the coronavirus. But I don't think I would take small children here. It's been a really hard year for amusement parks in general, but this is a great manifestation of what I like about Six Flags Over Texas, but also what makes me kind of sad about Six Flags Over Texas. And so you look at the theming attempt for this particular ride here, and it's pretty good. I enjoy the Louisiana Bayou atmosphere. This entire roller coaster here is actually inside, so that's cool. It's all in the dark. However, in case you can't tell, it's kind of badly maintained. It looks like it hasn't had any kind of upkeep in several years. So, good attempt, but they're kind of losing it on the execution. And I don't know if it's always been like this, or it's just a result of the coronavirus, with revenues being so far down and, priorities being shifted within the park. The queue for the ride that we're actually in is called Runaway Mountain. It's an okay ride. It's an indoor roller coaster. I would say the biggest thrill for me about this indoor roller coaster here was I didn't know whether it was going to be a launch coaster or have a lift hill, and it has a lift hill, so kind of to spoil it for you there. Now we cut to the other side of the park. We're walking through this section of the park that I'm not really sure what theme section it falls into. You can't really tell from what it is, but we're on our way specifically to Gotham City. That tall blue roller coaster looking thing that you see is actually the new Aquaman Ride. Now, it doesn't open till 2021, but you can get a sneak peek of it here on Hoosier Adventures. So, coming up here on the left, you're going to see a ride that I was very excited to ride, and it's the Justice League ride. The reason I was so excited is it's a dark ride, which is a good change of pace for this park, as well as it has some kind of cool shooting component the way like Men in Black, Alien Attack, or Buzz Lightyear Ranger Spin or whatever it's called has. However, like so much else in this park that day, Justice League was closed. So we didn't get to ride it, but I guess if I ever go back, it's something that I can look forward to. Now we're getting into the Gotham City section of the park. I know that Gotham City really doesn't fit with the theme of Six Flags Over Texas, but I don't care. It was probably my favorite section of the park, especially theming-wise. The Gotham City section of the park is actually home to some of the park's newest and best attractions. So it contains things like Batman the Ride, Mr. Freeze, the Joker roller coaster, Riddler's Revenge, and the newest Harley Quinn ride, which is pretty unique. I'll show you some footage of that here in a moment. Now, on the day that we were at the park, Batman the Ride was closed, the Joker roller coaster was closed, Mr. Freeze would close while we were waiting in line for it, and the Harley Quinn ride would also close while we were waiting in line for it. So not just most of Gotham City's best rides, but most of the park's best rides were closed while we were there, and two of them in particular closed while we were waiting in line for them. One, Mr. Freeze, looks like an amazing ride, and you can actually see the entrance to the Mr. Freeze ride here. It's supposed to look like an ice cream factory. It's very cool, has some good theming, and the coaster is one of those launch coasters, and it actually launches backwards, so I really, really wanted to ride it that day. However, it would close while we were waiting in line for it, and the Harley Quinn ride would close while we were waiting in line for it. It's a new type of ride. It reminds me of the old earthquake rides that would kind of spin you through the air, but it's a little bit more complex than that. So I was excited to get to ride that just because it's kind of a new, novel flat ride. However, it would close while we were waiting in line for it. To my knowledge, neither of the rides that closed while we were waiting in line reopened during the day, although I did see them doing tests on Mr. Freeze, so they were launching coaster trains without any people on them. Now, I know they have several of these Batman rides throughout the Six Flags across the United States, but I've never gotten to ride one, so I was really hoping to get to ride this one, but from what I understood, it wasn't just down that day. It was going to be down for like over a month. They were waiting on a very specific part for it, so not going to be riding that anytime soon. By this point, we were probably 2 to 4 hours into the day, and this is when the crowd started to really kind of pour in. Again, the park was only open between the hours of 2 and 9, so you really kind of had to rush to get everything in. But I noticed just more and more people kept coming to the park, and lines kept getting longer, and with so many of the attractions being closed, rides that aren't e-ticket attractions started to get really long wait times. So Riddler's Revenge here, we ended up waiting in line for quite a long time. And I think the problem was just there were more and more people coming into the park, and you get to this Gotham City section of the park, and it doesn't really connect to anything else. There's sort of, from what I understood, one way in and one way out. So all these people come to this section of the park, they get trapped, they want to ride something. All the e-ticket rides are closed over here, so they get in line for the Riddler's Revenge. Now in the upper right-hand corner, you'll actually see the new Harley Quinn ride that I was talking about. Again, just bad luck, get in line, basically shuts down. I've never ridden one of these, quote, 4D coasters, so I was really hoping to get to ride Joker the Ride that day. However, it was closed. Now, people call them 4D coasters, but to me that doesn't really make sense because from what I understand, and I'm no scientist, so go ahead and put it in the comments if you want to. The fourth dimension is time, so do you get off that ride and you've lost a few days or gained a few days? I don't know. Put it in the comments if you understand how the fourth dimension works. So overall, Gotham City needs to fire the city manager, or they need to vote the bums out or something, because Gotham City has some serious infrastructure problems and none of its rides work right. This is kind of a strange area of the park. So we're on our way to the Judge Roy roller coaster. Odd name, but we're on our way to it, and it's sort of disconnected from the rest of the park. So there's the entrance to it, and you actually go under a walkway to get to it, but shocker, it was closed that day, so we didn't get to ride it. And the Texas swings here, which are 400 feet tall, were also closed that day. So the ride that you can see very cool and comfortably from the interstate, I was excited to ride but didn't get to ride. This is Superman Tower of Power, also closed. So not going to get to ride that. From what I understand, this is a carbon copy of the Superman Tower of Power at other Six Flags parks. So if you've ridden one, you've probably ridden them all. However, it's very discouraging to pay the full price of admission and have the rides that you want to ride closed. So if I do ever decide to go back to Six Flags Over Texas, I have a lot of stuff to check off my bucket list when I get there. So by this point in the day, we were kind of running out of stuff to do just because we had done all the major rides that we wanted to do that were open. So we tried to re-ride a few things. Now you'll see that giant observation platform, which is meant to look like some kind of oil equipment. That is also closed. We were not able to go up in that. So although, you know, that wasn't as disappointing as other things. Here they have go-karts. From what I understand, they actually cost extra. This is taken from the line of Shockwave, which is one of the sort of lesser known, lesser important coasters at the park. So for my final thoughts on Six Flags Over Texas, I think it's a skip for 3 reasons primarily. One is COVID-19. You just really don't want to go to an amusement park right now just because of the COVID-19 restrictions. It's not really anyone's fault. It just kind of puts a damper on the whole thing. 2 was just the number of rides that were closed. So many rides were closed that I can't believe I had to pay full price. And 3, like I said, later in the day, it gets a little bit... questionable. There's a lot of riffraff in there. So like, comment, subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this episode and be on the lookout for more Hoosier Adventures.